right up, as they say. Kleenex. I don't know about you, but sometimes I just get filled with such joy. The tears just come. Anybody have that feeling too sometimes? It just squeeze out. Last week somebody took my Kleenex from here, so I was stuck. I don't know if you noticed, but I was being very demure about it. Not having my Kleenex.
Let's see if this is better. Can we do that? Okay. Well, today we've got a wonderful gentleman that we're going to be exploring a bit. How many of you are familiar with Joel Goldsmith in the Infinite Way? I have been introduced to him over the years. The Infinite Way. I'll tell you a little bit about him. I have loved his work for years, and I love these stories because we have discovered and we have talked about so many interesting people over these last few weeks. Lots and lots of New Thought people, lots of people that made a big difference in New Thought and unity and Christian Science, or whatever it might be. Wonderful impact. And in each case, it appeared that they had an incident, they had an experience in their life that got them going. It just gave them that little boost. And Joel Goldsmith had that kind of experience. He lived in Patterson, New Jersey. His parents were Jewish, non-practicing Jews. He was born in 1892. He passed away in 1964 at the age of 72, so he was quite young. I consider that young. Who thinks that's young? I need young. Good. But he lived a very full life. During the time that he was a young man, his father was very ill in London, and they called him and said, "You must come get him. He's going to die, and we don't have means to bury him." He was at a hotel. And so instead of giving up the ship on his father, he flew over to London and found a Christian Science practitioner just by some circumstance. And his father was healed. His father got well. We often wonder, I do now, how all that healing takes place. We've been talking about that triangle of prayer lately a lot, and the vibration that you can bring to another simply through prayer and by connecting with that inner self that you have. That inner being in you. It's like a beautiful triangle. You, God, that person, you, God, that person, whoever it might be. But his father was healed. And he was absolutely amazed. He couldn't believe it because he was dying. And then the same thing happened to him not too many years later. And so he called in a Christian Science practitioner. Now, I know Jan grew up with Christian Science. I grew up thinking Christian Science was quackery because of growing up in a medical family. Did anybody else have that experience with Christian Science growing up? That you just thought it was something kind of bizarre and weird? Or no, am I the only one? And that, of course, came from family. Because if you were from a medical side of the tracks, you didn't go to the spiritual healing side of the tracks. But anyway, he was also healed. And he stopped pretty much everything he was doing and began researching himself the Gnostic Gospels, all of the old Aramaic texts, the Greek texts, this and that. It was one of those things, one of those circumstances. I'm sure some of each of you probably had one, where one day life changed for you and you began going another direction. Anybody have that experience? Something came into your life. Maybe it was a divorce. Maybe it was losing a child. Maybe it was losing a spouse. Maybe it was losing a job. Maybe it was a career change. Something changed, and you began to see the world differently. So that's what happened to him. And so he began studying and so on. We should go ahead and take a look at this affirmation. Lori, if you have it up there. Joel Goldsmith. We're going to talk a lot more about prayer today. Our prayer should not be asking for anything. Think about this in the way that you were raised to think about prayer, certainly the way I was raised to think about prayer. It must be asking and seeking and knocking for more light, greater spiritual wisdom, and greater discernment. How many of you thought of prayer that way? Does that resonate? It's a different kind of prayer than "Dear God, please." It's "Help me, enlighten me, help me know what to do in this circumstance." How many of you have had that situation lately? Anybody? You've said to yourself, "I don't know." I had it this week. I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go with this situation. I don't know. One of the very, very early talks that I gave here, I remember, Lori, you nodding your head, was sometimes we just lack clarity. We lack clarity. We're not clear. We're not sure. But what we can know is that by giving it time, by going with this beautiful affirmation here, which we can say together or not, the clarity will come, the discernment will come, and that comes by getting quiet and by listening to the inner voice and not listening to those outside of your own inner voice. If they're not having your experience, they're not going to understand who you are. And it's perfectly okay to say to yourself, "I'm not clear yet," or to say to someone else, "I'm not clear yet." We don't even have to figure it out. And so that's what Joel Goldsmith was all about. The infinite way. The infinite way was about going within. So what happened is, after he had his healing experience, he did go back for a while to Paterson, New Jersey, where he had a business in the business district that was actually a Jewish and Dutch ghetto, Paterson, New Jersey. And the reason I know that is because my grandparents, my father's parents, were from Paterson, and he had a women's garment factory in Paterson. It was a tough life. It's not an easy life. A lot of immigrants. He also spent time in the Marines in World War I and came back. What he decided to do was to research all that he possibly could. I'm not sure he thought of it as research, to enlighten himself. And in 1947, he wrote The Infinite Way, which was his book about how to touch base with God. And Dale, you might know who that reminded me of. The silence. Touching base with the silence. We don't give enough credit to the silence, do we? And that it's within the silence. How many of you think you give enough credit to the silence? I don't. I need to do more. I'm working on it. How about you? I'm working on it. Because it's in the silence, without all the chatter, that those answers come. Do we really believe that? Really? That if we wait long enough, we're quiet long enough, that A will come, and then B, and C. Is that how it works with you? Yes? When you don't know what to do? So The Infinite Way, when people began following his work, he published the infinite way, and it was basically kind of his ramblings. It was a short book. It was only about 140 some pages. And people might have considered it rambling. He didn't want it structured a certain way. He wanted his friend of his, and the friend's sister helped him get it published. He self-published in the beginning because nobody wanted to listen to that nonsense anyway. Now, how many times have we heard that? Where people have had to self-publish because no one thought what they had to say was of value. So it really is kind of a lonely road, isn't it, when you put yourself out there and you say, this is who I am. After a period of time, he thought he would retire, but people began, just think of how fascinating this is, scrambling for more and more of Joel Goldsmith after The Infinite Way came out and was published, and it was a small book. So when he moved to Hawaii with his wife, he began hosting meetings in his home. About 30 to 40 people a day came clamoring to hear the infinite way. The infinite way. I'll share a few of his pithy ideas with you. It's everything that we have been enjoying, everything we know. Basically, he said, let that be. Basically, he said that there are few people in this world that ever really get to know God. And he said, for most people, God has just remained a term, a power outside of themselves, something that they reach out to. God itself has not become a living reality except a very few people. So in the infinite way, what he taught over and over again was how to touch base with, how to get connected to God. Do you ever feel like you'd like to be more connected than you are? And he says we always are. It's our inability to reach into and to become that which we fully are. And it does take some discipline. He said as humans we become separated from our source. It's the way the world works. He spoke a lot of sense consciousness. S-E-N-S-E. Sense consciousness. Who also spoke a lot and used that terminology. Sense consciousness was Charles Fillmore. Sense consciousness means man's consciousness. Man, woman. Man or woman's consciousness. That we still think we've got it right. We still think we can make it work. We still think we can figure it out when the answers come in the silence. The answers come in the silence. And what is it about us as humans that we go, oh sure, I know that, but I'm going to try to figure this one out myself. Because we're human. I think there's actually a natural resistance to it. God expresses God, he said, and that expression is you. God expresses God, and that expression is you. There's no other expression of God for you than you. That's a heavy load, isn't it? That means we need to be conscious of many things. How many have ever had an occasion where you lose it? You lose it. Anybody lost it lately? Anybody lost it lately? I mean, really lose it? I had that experience this week. I must have been Jesus turning those tables over in the temple. I was madder than hell. Am I the only one?
No.
I had it yesterday.
Who had it this week?
Yesterday.
God expressing. Oh no. I'm supposed to be a minister. How can I do that? How can I be so angry at that individual? what the beauty of it was? As I was doing it, I knew it. You know what I mean? I knew it. I said to myself, girl, you're losing it. You've lost it. And then later, and I didn't do what my dear sister says. She always says, I tell God I'm sorry. I didn't have to say I'm sorry. I was already that. And so are you. So I'm so glad to know some of you are normal. Thank you. Thank you for that. God expresses God, and that expression is you. God expresses God, and that expression is me. Now, these are his words. This is what got him worldwide following. Do you know there's still Jonathan Goldsmith groups all over this country? Did you know that? Active groups. There was a woman here last summer when I don't know that I spoke that Sunday, but I was here. She comes from St. Louis once in a while here in the summer to this church, and she's big on the infinite way. And she was telling me, do you have a group at your church? And I said, no, we don't. But we would need to have an infinite way group, because people get together and support each other in expressing as that. So how do we do that? Consciously aware of it, right? And when we lose it, we pick up those pieces, they're behind us, and we move on. That brings us to forgiveness, too. There are many people, including Joel Goldsmith, who don't believe that there's ever anything really to forgive, that it's simply part of the human dilemma. I like an I'm sorry now and again, don't you? But it's really not important. It's really not necessary for someone to say I'm sorry, or for me to say I'm sorry, forgive me. Because we're already forgiven. Again, the affirmation, your prayer will not be an asking or seeking for anything. This changes it, doesn't it? It will be an asking and a seeking and a knocking for more light, greater spiritual wisdom, and greater discernment. Can you get that in your head? You've got it in the bulletin. Praying for discernment. I have a decision to make. I'm praying for discernment. Because my mind can go here and here, my mind can go here, my mind can go here, my mind can create scenario after scenario. Anybody else do that? What if this, what if this, what if this, what if this? Right now, I'm going to eat my own words, and I'm going to ask for discernment and clarity. And not be rushed. Not be rushed. And then know that that answer will come. And when it does, it will fit like a kid glove. It's the infinite way. It's the infinite way. Joel says through prayer, you can reunite with your source. Sounds like unity, doesn't it? He uses the term practical Christianity quite a bit in his work. Practical and working Christianity, practical Christianity, that kind of thing. I don't know that he and Charles Fillmore were ever knew each other or were friends, but they certainly could have been. Reunited with your source. We're never separate from it, are we? But we sometimes feel we are. Do you feel that way sometimes, like you're out on a limb? Remember Shirley MacLaine's wonderful book about being out on a limb? Do you ever feel sometimes like you're out there and you have just momentarily sort of don't have a safety net under you? So, what do? We reconnect, don't we? Doing the exact practice that we just did in prayer here. I've done it this week. I did it several times. I sat down and got quiet. Your prayer will not be an asking or a seeking for anything. I think that is his, but the prayer is aligning. There's a lot of talk, a lot of use of the word vibration. He doesn't use it, but I believe that to vibrationally align with the vibration that is source. That's our goal. And we can do that by just getting quiet for a while. I think I did it the day I made the corn chowder. I told you that story. Some of you have your own way, how you can realign yourself and get yourself back in that place. He says that the best way to learn how to pray is admit that you really don't know how to pray, and then open yourself to whatever comes through. And if you're praying for another, you don't need to worry about the outcome. You don't even need to tell them. I'm sure that's the case in Silent Unity. Some of you have had the opportunity to tour through there. I have. Where they just sit and hold space in that big room that's all the walls are solid with prayer requests. They're not praying for, they're holding that space, that vibration in prayer. Prayer is a vibration. Prayer is an active vibration. Active. And the source of it is source. When you're praying or meditating for someone, do not try to transfer thoughts to him or her. Do not try to know what is right or best for anyone else. You agree? Sometimes we think we do, don't we? Oh, that's the thing that'll get me in trouble. And I think I know best for somebody else. I'm so sure of it. I've seen it, you see, through my eyes. Sit in a state of complete receptivity, and then let the Father, of course, God or Source, function as your consciousness. Let me repeat that. Just close your eyes for a second. Don't try to figure out what's best for someone else, but sit in a state of complete receptivity, and then you function as consciousness. You don't need to receive a message. Be patient. Whoever you're praying for will receive it, but not from you, but from God, source of all. That's our gift to ourselves, to ourselves. Calls upon us to really step up to the plate. By being able to talk with you and share with you this truth makes me stronger. I hope you feel stronger. It's simple. It takes discipline. And it takes forgiving yourself when you lose it.